So today, for this part, today the main focus is prayer. Prayer is a pretty big topic in the Christian faith and being in the Catholic Church as well. And the man of the hour is here. There's 3 chapters to cover. It's a very interesting topic. Before I became Catholic, I went through this. I didn't really think much about prayer. Prayer was just something I did, and didn't really think about the formal side of it and the informal side of it and the different kinds of prayers. So reading these chapters really kind of give you lots of interesting roadmaps, a way to grow and focus your energy, and when you can focus and when you should listen. That's part of the interesting part of prayer as well, sometimes just listening. So I'll just kind of cover some highlights and some notes from my takeaways from going through this. But for the most part, prayer is a personal encounter with Jesus. That's the way I perceive it. I see it as most important. It's a personal opportunity to encounter God, and it's in addition to that, asking for things, it's a pouring out of it's more of our ability to listen. Is like I was starting to say a minute ago, prayer is not only just asking for things like many people do. It's an opportunity to listen and ask God for where He wants us to go. St. Augustine wrote, I think one of the best little snips here was that true prayer is nothing but love. It feels like this loving exchange between a parent and a child, that sort of thing. In fact, the text talks about Jesus' interaction with going away to pray was kind of like a father going, or a son going to his father asking, or his parent asking for support and strength and that sort of thing. St. Francis de Sales points out that everyone needs a half an hour prayer every day, unless they're very busy, and then they need 1 hour. I think that's a really great point. I think I'm a poster child for that. I find myself too busy to do anything and get nothing done, even though I'm nothing but busy sometimes. So, in Catechism, prayer is the vital and personal relationship with the living and true God. So, God begins the process, the point where He calls us, whether it's here or whether it's somewhere else in our faith lives, and the intersection and our response to that is really prayer. It's the event is always grace-filled, and it's a gift, that opportunity to have that conversation with God. Prayer is something that not only happened through Jesus and following Jesus. It was an event that was a big part of the Old Testament and the Jewish tradition as well. Prayer was always done around the Ark of the Covenant. It was the Psalms that were sung at the temple were all prayers. So, prayer goes way, way back. The New Testament, Mary and Joseph were the ones who taught Jesus to pray. It's kind of an example of how we're, as parents, called to teach our children to pray. That's our first opportunity to share God with our kids, and we should take that and run with it as much as we can. Jesus prayed in the synagogue. He prayed around people in public. He went away. I don't know if everybody remembers, there are many times when he went away to be by himself to contemplate and pray, and he taught his disciples to pray. He was continually teaching others how to pray. After Jesus, Paul prayed a lot in his letters and talked about the praise and the intercessions, and he prayed in time of difficulty. Those are the three I think that kind of structure came out more from Paul, it seems like, than others, where he always started with praise, and that's kind of what I think I've been, focusing on a little bit, is to, instead of jumping right into a prayer asking for something, that whether it's from me or somebody else, to be thankful for all the gifts we have, because we're really, especially here, we're so fortunate to have what we have, and to be focus on ourselves and sometimes asking for things we don't necessarily need, so we should be thankful for what we have before we start rolling through our wants and needs, that sort of thing. So there's 5 different kinds of prayer. Adoration, which is the first, which is a little different than pray. I mean, it's a little different than saying thank you. That's more of glorifying, acknowledging God as God, and He's all things to everybody. So, one of the things I probably don't do very well is, take that moment of adoration for thanking God for what He is, and appreciating Him. Petitions are asking for, imploring, pleading, crying out for forgiveness, for help, for yourself, that sort of thing. And then there's the prayer of intercession, where you're asking for a prayer on behalf of others. You may be praying for your children, or for the politicians you don't respect, or whatever it might be. It could be any number of things that we need to be praying for others, that God would help others for their needs. And then there's prayers of thanksgiving, which I kind of talked about a minute ago. And then prayers of praise, where we exalt Him with an open heart and obtain a glimpse of the joy of, kind of this praise and thank you for everything that we receive.
You really see that really par excellence in the Mass, right? The Mass is the highest form of prayer in the Catholic Church. You see all those aspects of praise, contrition, thanksgiving, and petition, or supplication, sometimes called, all throughout the Mass, right? So if you pay attention, you'll see those aspects all throughout.
Go ahead.
I had somebody call me once when I worked for the Archdiocese, and they were complaining that their child never had any time at Mass to pray. And it's like, they go to Mass the whole time, and they don't ever take any time to pray. It's like, well, then I tried to explain how every part of the Mass is a different kind of prayer.
Yeah, and that is on a different light, and part of that is an internal disposition, right? How are you receiving, what are you putting in? I know one of my early experiences coming back in the seminary was I was made the Master of Ceremonies at the Cathedral Basilica. And one thing that the priest Master of Ceremonies told us, the seminarians, was, this is horrible to say, but these liturgies are not time for you to pray. They're time for you to work, right? And it's true, because you have to keep on top of what's going on, but also even within that is trying to find time to pray, right? Recognizing what's happening and giving that due respect and honor and glorification to God, and receive that sanctification too. So there's ways of doing that in various ways, but you really get out of what you put into it too, right? So yeah.
And I think one of the, talk about the prayer, and the prayer that kind of covers all the types of prayer that I still struggle with the most. I think I talked about it in one of my other talks, is the Eucharistic prayer. It's a long prayer, and it basically goes through almost every type of prayer through that one moment. And I think that, it's a really, a neat opportunity to focus and be prepared to receive the Eucharist. And that's what that's the intention there. And in my, Mass experience, that's where I tend to wander the most. So I try to have a conscious effort during that time to focus in on that prayer.
And I may even kind of give permission in some ways too, because sometimes part of the Mass or any liturgy, or even in relative prayer, we talk about, you may talk about this really later, Lee, I don't know, but we talk about like rote prayer, like the words. But there's also 2 other forms of depth of that, right? And so sometimes the Mass kind of should lead you, like maybe you'll hear something in a homily and start thinking about that, right, instead of what's actually being said. Or maybe there's something like we do Lectio Divina here. You might hear a word or phrase, you want to focus on that. And that's okay. That's a form of prayer too. We call that meditative prayer, right? And then the deeper form could even be contemplative. And I don't know if we're going to talk about that later. Yeah, I think so. We'll do that later. Sorry, I derailed you.
No, it's all good. One of the things that we talk about is the need to rely on more than just the impulse to pray as well. The moment is great to capture that and use that, but then, we're human beings and we tend not to, follow through on things very well without structure. So the fact that, a lot of families and through the Mass and other ways structured, daily, sustained prayers are essential for a good prayer life. So a combination of spontaneous and structured prayer usually lends to the, and again, prayer life is about building a stronger personal relationship with God. It's that conversation, it's that listening, it's that responding to something you've heard or been called to do, that sort of thing. So, there are, like I mentioned, as a guide for prayer, our parents are our first teachers of prayer. We kind of recommend that. We still do with our kids and before meals, prayers, practice daily. The nighttime prayers and meal prayers. We go through fits and spells of trying to get a rosary going around our house, and then we fall off. But teaching our kids, the rosary and the other, prayers, the prayer at the end of Mass now, after the Mass is over, it's escaping me. The St. Michael prayer is one that the kids learned, and I never learned, and my wife didn't know, so it was kind of neat to have them, share that with us, as they knew it better than we did, as it was rolled out around here.
Yeah, some of those are little, like we call little T traditions. So St. Michael prayer has been around for ancient times, but like in our family, we always used to pray that at the end of the Rosary. But not everyone does that, right? So the Rosary is kind of a very interesting prayer because there is the 10 Hail Marys, the Our Fathers, the Glory Bees, and also the Creed and everything else. So there's specific prayers that are affected by the Rosary, but everything else is kind of like extra, right? So some people add certain prayers, some people don't do those prayers. Some maybe add like intercessions or like kind of pray for go through a litany of saints. I tend to do that in my Rosary, but not everyone does, right? So the Rosary is wonderful because you can kind of do that on your own. It can kind of become your own little T tradition, which is great, right? But there's still a structure there though too.
Right, and that's why prayer is this lifelong personal journey, right? It's one of these things that you find works for you, you latch onto that, and then you try to keep building on it. It's like one of the things I thought was interesting in the writing is we are encouraged to pray, but the priests and the deacons have a responsibility, an obligation to teach prayer. That is a core, something you guys have to do.
Better so there's.
Hey. There's several ways that we can express prayer. Vocal prayers, which are like recited and spoken prayers. Meditative prayer, which is kind of this listening and asking what my calling is. What is my calling in Christian life? It's just finding this time to just listen, whether it's listening in a quiet place or listening in a loud place, listening in Mass, listening. I find that there's a lot of different ways that you can participate in prayer life around St. Gabriel's. We have, in addition to the Masses, there's groups that do Rosary, that pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet. There's the Eucharistic Adoration, novenas at different times of the year, and those are great opportunities to, I feel like I have a better meditative experience during those. Even though there might be a recited prayer going on around me, I find that I can maybe keep some of the noise out and listen.
And one opportunity this evening at 5 o'clock is we're actually praying communal Liturgy of the Hours. So if you've never actually experienced that before, it's a good opportunity to experience that. We'll stream it also, so if you guys want to watch it too.
You want to talk about what that is?
It's called Liturgy of the Hours. So it's also known as the Divine Office. So this is something that priests and religious are required to pray every day. But it's also open to laity, right? Laity can even lead it. If there's no, even if there's clergy around, you can still lead it. But it's actually, Lee was talking about how we have our, roots in prayer from the Jewish faith, right? This is kind of it comes from the Jewish faith, where we take hours of the day to sanctify and offer to God. And that's centered around the Psalms. In the same way the Jewish people would stop at times of the day and pray, priests and religious do that as well.
And how often and how does it work?
Well, depending on if you're in a archdiocesan priest, we pray a minimum of these liturgy hours specifically, 5 hours. So that includes what we call office of readings, also called matins. Morning prayer is called lauds. You have daytime prayer, which would be sect, non, or terce, which is sometimes during the afternoon, in the morning, afternoon. Evening prayer, which is called Vespers, and then night prayer, which is called Compline.
Like for the whole hour?
Well,
No.
no.
Sounds
it's
exhausting.
well,
On the
it's
hour.
it's on the hour.
hour.
So like when I would wake up in the morning, let's say before 8 o'clock,
Okay.
usually it's more like 6, 7,
Right.
whatever. I would start my day with morning prayer.
Got it.
Right,
But
and then
not-
mass.
Got it.
And yeah, morning prayer would take maybe 10 to 15
Got
minutes. Some take longer, like whole office of readings, there's actually 2 full readings, so that might take more like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But that can be done anytime throughout the day. But there's certain hours that are specified that should be done.
And it's, Liturgy of Hours is on this great app here. I've mentioned this app before. So if you ever were curious and you want to follow along, it's on. It's also.
iBreviary that's what we use here.
Say it again.
iBreviary, is it
iBreviary,
That's free.
divineoffice.org.
But the one we use for the Liturgy of the Hours here is iBreviary.
Yeah, that's actually probably the most accurate translation.
Ron, how do you spell that?
Just the letter I with breviary, B-R-I-E-V.
Vespers, is that the one you do?
That's what we're doing tonight.
A-R-Y.
So we're trying to do, we're starting to do like once a month. On every third Sunday at 5 o'clock, we do Liturgy of the Hour Vespers for that Sunday.
We have a basketball.
And we'll probably, I'm sorry, say that?
We have a basketball game.
Yeah, no, and then we're looking maybe to expand it. So we're actually kind of growing. Like
No, that's
we get about maybe 20 people come usually.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
so as we grow, we're going to try and do maybe once a week, or well, maybe every Sunday as we go forward. So we'll
That's
see.
awesome.
So tonight is called what again?
So it's called Vespers.
Okay.
Right. So that's at 5 o'clock. It'll be before the 5:30 mass tonight.
And they're on certain hours, correct?
Yeah, I mean, so generally speaking, right? So morning prayer, when does morning end? Well, you could say that ends at noon, right? But typically, you want to try to do it whenever it's when you first get up. And then you have afternoon prayer. So you have mid-morning, midday, mid-afternoon. Now, some orders actually pray all of those, right? It just depends on what your obligation is. So a priest, when they're ordained, even when they're ordained, they pledge to pray liturgy. That's part of their promises, is to pray for liturgy hours for the good of the people. And that's what we do every day, under the pain of mortal sin if we miss. Right? That's a big deal.
For you
Yeah,
too?
that's a
Yes.
lot of stress.
Not for lay people, for
Yeah, I didn't know
clergy.
that.
If we miss an hour, that's a mortal sin.
Wow, that's
Right?
sweet.
That is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
It keeps you out of trouble.
It should. It should.
You don't have any time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, in addition to that, though, I mean, we also pray, usually most priests really play a rosary every day or do a holy hour, which is really beneficial.
Will we learn more about that going forward, about the rosary?
Yeah. Well, maybe we're
Well, this
about
is
it
the,
today.
this is kind of the
Yeah.
day where we talk a little bit. I'm happy to talk about the rosary.
Yeah.
I think I've gotten to,
I know what it is, but I don't. You know what I mean?
There are pamphlets that have.
Are there?
prayers and stuff,
Okay.
And maybe I can bring get some for.
let's just,
I don't know.
let's just go there. Why don't we just go there? I mean, this is what the whole point of this is, right? Is to talk about prayer. And so, and I'm not a lifelong Catholic, but the rosary is a prayer that really became popular and was instituted in the 1600s, is that right?
Okay, the history actually, so it comes out from this monastic tradition, right? Monasteries. So it actually started with every monastic monk or nun would actually have to recite all the psalms
150,
every day,
right?
150 every day. And so it was thought that was maybe a little extreme, and so they kind of condensed it to this kind of recitement of the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and the Glory be on this kind of rope of beads. And that was like more instituted more like Middle Age, maybe the 7th, 8th century.
I brought one with me. just
Yeah, there you
to
go.
talk about it.
And so it became kind of this prayer throughout the day that these monks and nuns would pray on this kind of necklace-like, beads. And that then kind of got introduced
You
to
have
the
one?
Universal Church around maybe the 12th,
My
13th
son.
century.
My mom brought one back from Italy from
Yeah.
my son.
So we started with the Psalms, we moved into these more understandable prayers we get from the Gospels, right? The Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Glory Be, and then became more of a prayer for the universal church, probably around the 12th, 11th century.
And so, yeah, and it's boiled down to fewer,
Right.
repetitive Hail Marys, but it's all around those prayers. And during this, it is an intercessory prayer, meaning that, so one of the things that, as a Protestant coming into this, that I was always, before coming into this, becoming Catholic, that it was hard for me to get my head around the idea of asking saints and asking people, praying to, I felt like I was praying to something that wasn't God, right? That's what this whole idea of saints and Mary was to me at the time, and I didn't understand it, right? And really, if you're praying to Mary or to a saint, you're not doing it right. You're asking them to pray for you. So that's what the Rosary is. That's what many of these prayers that involve saints, they're all intended to ask them to pray for you, to intercede, to ask Jesus or God something on your behalf for you. And that's in its own right a little bit of a challenging thing, but it's no different. I look at it as no different than asking, hey Ron, would you mind praying with me or praying for me? This is a community of faith that extends beyond what's on the earth. That's kind of my basic understanding of it.
That makes so much sense, yeah.
I have like a silly analogy, but like one of my favorite movies is It's a Wonderful Life. I love that movie so much. And like in the very beginning, there's like this scene where it's like, oh Joe, we're getting a lot of calls on this guy, on George, right?
George.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes when I think about intercessory prayer, I think about that scene in that movie where it's like, I'm getting a lot of calls on Sherry Massman. Like a lot of people are calling and asking for some help for Sherry, and I don't know. Sometimes it helps me remember that that's what that's like, because there's so and it's the bridging of the community between like the saints who are closer in proximity to God, hopefully, than we are, and the community people around here. So when you're praying, you're kind of asking, like, I might be asking my husband to pray for me, but I may also be asking like Saint Teresa of Avila to pray for me, like, and I want them both to be like calling up the big guy.
Right. And we'll have a session on the community of saints coming up in the next few weeks, so we'll be talking about it more in depth. But yeah, I mean that's exactly right. That's how the church understands the community of saints, is that these are our friends, right? That we're asking for that intercession as we would our friend here on earth, but they just happen to be with God in heaven. So good, they're closer, right? So it's more of a direct line.
So how do you learn? Is there a place to go to learn about the saints and what kind of each one's
Sure.
strengths are?
Saints.com.
Right.
I mean, there's actually on Catholic. I think it's Catholic Answers. They have like a whole depository of all the saints.
What was that called?
I think it's CatholicAnswers.com.
How many saints are there? Do we know?
Yeah. So we have to understand when we're talking about the saints, right? The saints there's canonized saints.
Right.
And then there's the saints that are not necessarily canonized. Anyone in heaven is the term to be a saint. So you have saints in your own family, right? We won't necessarily know that for sure until we get there, but we know for sure there are people in heaven because the church has claimed through a very, very in-depth investigation that there are certain people that are with God in heaven, and that we honor them as canonized saints.
There's a lot that we have recognized and a lot that we don't.
Yeah, exactly right. We actually have a lot that, some are very obscure, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the community of saints, like how that all happens and maybe the history of that. So yeah, there's a lot.
Thanks for the assignment, Father.
Right.
You got that one, don't you?
I mean, the thing,
Oh, yeah.
if you
I'm
guys,
scenario.
those of you who are going through this process, I hope you can see that like the Catholic faith is like this ocean, this endless ocean of stuff. So if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't have a handle on the saints, or I don't have a handle on the Rosary, or things like that, okay, breathe, because it is meant to be, the faith is a deep, wide ocean, meant to sustain us and teach us anew every day. So I guess I feel like I think for me personally, like if I was sitting in your shoes, I'd be like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, it's a little overwhelming.
I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. And but I would say it is like the ocean kind of washes every day, new experiences, old experiences become new again and again. So you don't have to be able to put your arms all the way around all of this in order. It's so I don't know if that helps or not. But
It's like we say, like when we first met, right? The first thing I told you guys is that we're not going to be able to teach you everything, we're just trying to give you the building blocks here. And it's okay if you don't understand everything. That's okay, because that's the whole point. This is a lifelong process.
And that, honestly, that's why I'm a catechist, because I'm still learning. I still
Right.
like learning.
yeah, like look at the boat so you can actually go into the ocean. How about that?
Yeah, good analogy, I like that. All right.
But circling back on to close the loop on the Rosary, I guess that was the question, and where we ran to is, it's a prayer. It's that opportunity again. It's a reflect. There's definitely you're praying, asking Mary to intercede, but there's also these what's the term? The mysteries. So there's a focal point of each decade when you're saying the Hail Mary, full of grace. There's a focal point that's intended to be what we are, reflecting on, but that doesn't mean that it's not how it has to happen. It can be, again, I find it more of this opportunity to not hear the noise and be in a rhythm and focus on something else.
And what you'll find out there's many different ways. Like there's kind of the biblical rosary. You can like pray each bead with like a particular passage of scripture or mystery of scripture. There's like intercessory rosary. There's a lot of these different kind of directions the rosary goes, and even the mysteries that the church actually proclaims to be kind of more traditional, which are like kind of 4 different mysteries. There's so for tomorrow we'll actually pray the joyful mysteries. Those are kind of focused on Christ's birth. We have the sorrowful mysteries, which is really focused on Christ's passion, death, and resurrection. Death. We have the glorious mysteries, resurrection, and also what happened to Mary. And then the luminous, which is more about the life of Jesus here on earth. But the church also says you don't have to be limited to those rosaries too. Many people maybe find they kind of make up their own mysteries when it comes to, but it's all focused on the life of Jesus, of course. But maybe some mothers find it kind of interesting to reflect on the first time that Mary breastfed, or maybe the first time that Jesus took first steps, right? These are all mysteries of humanity of Jesus Christ and his divinity that can be reflected on. And like me saying that this is sort of it starts kind of with a rote prayer in some ways with Our Father, Hail Mary, but there's a rhythm that kind of leads you into more of a deeper meditative or contemplative prayer too. And so you can kind of even slip in between those as you're praying the Rosary as well. So yeah, it's always good to keep that in
The
mind.
good thing, my wife as a nurse has noticed over time when she was dealing with people that were dying or had starting to get dementia, that those Catholics would be able to go back and still, even though they couldn't remember anything else, they could always remember the Hail Mary, Our Father. So there is a beauty and purpose of the roteness, that a lot that I guess can be with you your whole life.
So the beads, so you hold between your fingers a bead, and you say a new prayer each time, and you switch to a new bead. So each bead is like a
Yeah,
new
there's
prayer.
a decade is 10
Yeah,
beads.
so the bigger bead is the Our Father.
Okay.
The smaller beads between those are Hail Marys.
That's these 10.
And at the end of the 10th one, you would say a glory bead.
Okay.
That's pretty much the basics of the Rosary.
And you do one full
One
every
serving.
One loop. Yeah.
and that's the rosary.
That's right.
So about how long would that take to do a full loop? Just out of
It depends how quick you want to pray.
I've seen some turbo rosaries that can be pulled off in 10 minutes
I
or
mean,
so.
I'd
here's
say-
the- let me say this. When I pray the prayers in Latin, it takes me maybe like 8 minutes.
Yeah,
It
if you do it
does.
yourself, it's if you're doing it silently or even quickly under your breath, it
Yeah.
can take 12 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say
And the
12,
extra
14
treats we
minutes.
allowed a
Yeah.
half an hour
That is-
with a big group.
Yeah, if you get like
Okay.
more communal, it could be a little longer. But
I
yeah,
know when the
it's-
guys
That is
do it.
not as long as I would have thought.
Yeah.
I would have thought an
I mean,
hour.
is there like something you follow as you go through? Like how?
Yeah.
I should have, last time I did this, I brought the pamphlets with me.
Yeah, there's
but-
a little
Yeah.
brochure.
We can bring them next week.
Is it that little like booklet about that?
Yeah, the little trifold.
But like,
It
there's
tells
also,
you
again,
which-
there's a lot of great apps. And again, that Hallow app. Do you guys know what that looks like? It looks like this little purple deal. And it, It's Hallow, Hallow. And so on here, you could press the button and they'll do the rosary and you can just listen along and pray along with it, which
that
is
is
like
cool.
lovely. Ascension Press have these two priests that I adore, and they do the rosary, so that's the one I
Wait,
like.
no, I'm not on there. What are you talking about, Sherry?
Is Mike Schmitz on?
These are two Ascension priests, and they crack me up. They're really funny, and so I listen to them. They take me through the Divine Mercy. They take me through the Rosary. And so if any of you kind of want those particular kind of, I'd be happy to forward those to you.
Maybe just, just very briefly, if you take the Rosary, so these first 3 beads, you could have certain prayers, but typically you start with the Creed, the Apostles' Creed. You then do Our Father, 3 Hail Marys, a Glory Be. And then you just go around the Rosary with our first joyful mystery, Our Father who art in heaven, 10 Hail Marys, a Glory Be. Then you start the next mystery. And you just work yourself around the Rosary until you get done with all 5. And then
there's a concluding prayer.
there's a concluding prayer. You could say the
Fatima.
Hail Holy Queen, if you
Fatima
know that
prayer.
one. The Fatima prayers can be at each bead,
That's
right?
each bead.
And each Our Father. Before you actually say after the Glory Be, you can say the Fatima, but that's also not necessarily required.
So using her app is a great idea, so you don't
Yeah,
get stressed out. That
exactly.
You have all
Yeah,
the
that's what I'm saying. It kind of just flows. Once you start doing it a few times, it actually makes it much.
Right, and having someone say it over and over.
Yeah,
How
and
you start to know it.
And so I would encourage you guys. So on Tuesday, I think every night at 6:30, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Every
In the
night?
church.
Yeah. So there's a group that gets together at 6:30 every night.
If you look at the front of the bulletin on the right side, there's a list of all the devotions that happen every week
Right.
at the church. And I know the guys get together outside every Thursday night at 9:30. It's kind of late, but the kids are in bed. And so 9:30, get together for about a half hour or less and just say the rosary. There's
There's a women's one too, I
Is
think,
there?
once a month, maybe, or.
It will not stress you out. Father actually told me once, and I've now completely bought into this, that there are studies that show that you calm down just for repetition of the Hail
Totally.
Mary, that there's something about that physically changes you, and you'll feel it when you do it.
So I would believe that once you know the words. to
Once
say.
you know
But
the
the
words,
process
yeah.
of knowing the
Well,
words.
I
is
think-
part of it. You- it will
Well,
help have
That's
some
why
idea.
listening along could be
Yeah, that's
very
like-
comforting.
Right.
To me,
Right.
like oftentimes if I listen, it puts me into a meditative state. I just feel very different afterwards.
And also, I imagine if you go to those things, I know that people there would help you. And you don't even have to say anything. If you just sit there and listen, that's fine too. But I mean, even if you want help, people are going to be there to help you.
That's what I was gonna say. The first time I did this was on a retreat, and I didn't know it, and I grabbed this thing, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me,
Yeah,
this is my
that's
thing, you know?
right.
But I just having it and keeping it and listening, and it just was kind of one of those things that kind of, moved me a little bit. And then there's other prayers that are done on the same set of beads besides the Rosary. The
Divine Mercy.
the Divine Mercy is another one that is very popular, and it has a group here that comes up at
Tuesday.
9 o'clock on Tuesdays, and it's a sung prayer there. And again, sometimes it's just great to sit and reflect and listen and that whole deal. You don't have to. These prayers aren't, especially, I would say if it's a participatory prayer, and you don't feel like participating, that's awesome too. Just be open to it, and showing up and being a part of something is, there's nothing people that are there to pray love to see more than other people to pray with.
And I would be happy if any of you want to do just one other person. I would be happy to meet you in church. I'd be happy to do one-on-one. Like I could do the rosary with you one time so that you could kind of walk through it and talk about it. Because sometimes, for me, again, it always comes down to a level of comfort. Like I tend to get nervous about things, and then I think to myself like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to do it right, or so I'll hesitate. But I always feel braver when someone is willing to do something with me. So anyway.
I might also say too, there's no wrong way to pray. Right? That's another thing too. There's really no wrong way to pray. So even if you screw up, good.
Well, and if I'm correct, the prayer is actually from God. So
Correct.
we think that it's us that's saying we're going to pray, but it's actually that what do you call it?
The Holy
The
Spirit's
motivation
in us.
of the Holy Spirit inside of us,
Actual
wanting
grace.
to reach back to God to pray.
Call it actual grace.
So, yeah.
And if any of you travel a lot and want to say the rosary, because I always say it when I'm traveling, they have finger rosaries and bracelet rosaries that are a lot easier to take and use. You have your own?
I have one here, it's right here, right? So this just fits around your ring here.
Oh,
It's
wow.
just 10,
Oh, neat.
I used to do that. I used sometimes just put it on my ring finger or something, just kind of
Yeah, and do it.
go through it. You know.
It's, yeah, it's
So
handy
easier.
to keep and take with you. The longer beats, things happen.
So you go through that multiple times then?
Yeah, 5 times, right? But I mean,
Oh,
it's just,
you
yeah.
just-
They just keep on going around 5 times.
And the other thing I find really nice about the rosary is if you actually think about what that mystery is. I mean, like the first one, the birth of Christ, if you can actually think about being in a stable and smelling the smells you smell in a stable and feeling the straw. I mean, you can really go deeply into being there with this prayer, more so than I think most.
And that's also a form of what we call contemplative prayer. It's actually kind of put yourself imaginatively into the scene. The Jesuits kind of look at, I mean, depending what school you look at, there's different types of schools of prayer, or spiritual, spirituality. They're all ingrained in the Catholic Church, but for the most part, those 3 levels of road prayer, meditative and contemplative, are all pretty similar.
One of the neatest rosaries I did was over at the Gabe's house for Acts formation. I think Sherry, you were there, and we did it with a giant rope. So everyone was
Wow.
standing, like, the giant rope was the rosary, and everybody was standing at one.
That is
And
really
it
cool.
was really neat. That really was really
Puts it in
neat.
perspective.
Yeah.
So one of the things to touch on relative to prayer is what's called Sacramentals and Devotions. And I know we're running a little bit out of time here. This has been a great discussion, but so sacramentals are sacred signs instituted by the Church. They're always supposed to resemble the sacraments, and they include blessings, processions. They'll see a couple times a year where there'll be a procession, like the Corpus Christi procession. Those are all that's a sacramental.
We should hopefully do this year. We haven't done the last couple of years. We should do this year.
Or the Stations of the Cross. Is
Right.
the word coming
Isn't
up?
that really lengthy?
What, the Station of the
Uh-huh.
Cross? Again, it takes about half an hour.
Yeah,
Oh,
no
okay.
more than a half
Yeah.
hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
Prayers like the Rosary would be a sacramental, I think. And then objects can be sacramentals too. And holy water, psalms, or palms, ashes, candles, medals, those sorts of things. And again, before I became Catholic, it seemed like you were really focusing and praying to this or some object that you're not venerating it properly. If you're getting connected too much to the object, then it's not serving its purpose. It's supposed to be a conduit to focus your prayer in the right direction. So
Yeah,
again,
to that point, that's not like a magical talisman, right? That once it becomes blessed, it's not like, oh, now it's a magic thing, right? What sacramentals are meant to do is kind of to deepen your reception of the grace of the sacraments, right? So these things like the Rosary, these prayers, these kind of processions and other things, even though they're not sacraments themselves, they kind of supposed to lead us into a deeper reception of that grace. And we receive the sacraments, we receive it in a deeper, more enlightening way for us, right? So it's really more for the people's benefit than the actual thing itself. I always want to make sure that's the point.
other things that other sacramentals. Is exorcism is a sacramental as well. I don't know. That's a whole. Usually that takes half the conversation, but we use it on prayer instead. So,
Yeah, that's
but
good.
that's a whole thing where the priests are able to remove, evil and that sort of thing from a person who's needing it. But in addition to that side of it, you also have devotions. So you have sacramentals and you have devotions. Stations of the Cross is a devotion. Pilgrimages to shrines and other places are devotional. Lighting of candles. There's other things you'll see throughout the Catholic year that are devotionals. The blessing of throats for, on St. Blaise's Day, the Corpus Christi, the wearing of medal, all those sorts of things are devotions. Retreats are devotions. Those are all things that are intended to, my feeling is to focus you in the right direction, to focus your prayer, not to become the point of that.
Like, there's John, before you're going to be baptized here. So good.
Well,
So I want to point out that there's a difference between a minor exorcism and a major exorcism. So Jonathan was saying a minor exorcism. A major exorcism is devoted for someone actually who's possessed by a demon. And that has occurred.
What's a minor exorcism?
So minor exorcism would be like, it's really more of a preparation of a reception of some kind of...
Getting rid of your sins, right?
Yeah, so in this case, the minor exorcism, what happens, whenever anyone's baptized, you go through a minor exorcism to prepare them to receive the grace of the sacrament of baptism. But also that applies like houses, like when the priest goes to bless a house, there is a minor exorcism involved with that. It's just a driving out of any type of remnants of evil to prepare for the coming of grace. And again, it's always directed towards a deeper reception of the sacraments. So that's the point. But also, when it comes to major exorcisms, every priest has a capacity to do that, but that faculty has to be granted by the bishop. So every diocese in the United States has at least one devoted exorcist for those purposes.
I mean, do they happen like daily?
I don't know about daily.
I mean, are they happening like in St. Louis?
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
But I think one of the things that the text points out to be really,
So weird.
it's really important to differentiate between demonic possession and psychological illnesses. Obviously, before
yeah.
anything like that were ever to be
Yes.
taken, I know the church takes it very seriously to make sure that it's not,
Mental
you know,
illness.
It's a
yeah.
vetting process.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
So yes. So not just like you just call the exorcist and be like, he shows up, let's do this. There is like a level of like, well, let's have you talk to a psychiatrist. There's like some battery of testing of physical and mental capacity.
Once
So
Sherry
that's all-
says, I can't deal with this anymore, she sends
Right,
people
right.
to the exorcist.
Right.
But I
Also,
think
the name of the exorcist is always kept secret.
Oh,
So
so do you know?
Yes,
But we don't.
yes.
What do you mean the name of the, wait, what
Who's
did you say?
the
The
chosen
one
one?
that's
Oh,
dedicated to each
oh.
diocese, that remains a secret.
Well, not necessarily, because some of them are out there doing podcasts.
Well, they should.
Is it because obviously the spirits find them to
Yes.
protect them, right?
Yeah, it's really protection of everyone involved. Yes.
How does the person become
An exorcist?
taken over by demon? Like
It varies between every.
It does vary. So like part of that is like a level of allowance.
Yeah.
By the
so in other
person.
words,
Invitation,
yes.
invitation of the
Right.
individual.
by the person.
Right.
Okay.
So it's there's different forms we call it. So there's like obsession, and there's possession.
Okay.
So obsession is a little more like, let's say like if you were like walking around a house and you see like things move without you really knowing why. That's more of a form of obsession.
Okay.
Still not good and can be overcome. Possession is where a demon actually comes into your very being. And there's an allowance that's done in that. So the classic example, at least here in St. Louis, was, you probably have
Well, the
all
movie,
seen the
yeah.
movie Exorcist, right? There's a lot of Hollywood involved in that movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that movie's scary.
what it started with was a Ouija board. And the actually was a young man, his like 12-year-old boy, who was playing with a Ouija board, and through that there became allowance for the demon to come into him. And it was a long process. The process itself took like months to actually exorcise the demon fully. So
Did
it's
that little boy grow on to be a like a normal person?
yeah. But see, even then, the identity of whoever, that's also kept secret too.
Gotcha.
And there was a lot of problems with the movie and the book because it was like, they were kind of verging on that line where it's like, a lot of the stuff probably shouldn't be said.
Gotcha.
Sure.
Because that also causes other problems for the people.
Right.
Right, yeah.
So how often does stuff like that happen? Just out of
It
curiosity.
probably happens on more occasion than you think.
Like weekly?
I can't say for sure.
There,
Well,
there's
I
a,
think like the culture right now, I mean, like there's a lot more welcoming of that in our culture right now. I mean, there's a lot more of people who are interested, that they consider themselves witches and there's all.
Oh, I think it's totally
Furries,
stuff. It's
like that
trendy.
trend.
I mean, I hate to say that, but it is the whole Wiccan. Like
there's a group, the Healing and Deliverance group.
That's
that
right,
Gets
yes.
together
Right.
and they have regular masses, but they get together and pray over people to release them from potential evil that's surrounding that person, but not necessarily possession.
Correct.
So
That'd be more the
we're always,
obsession.
all of us are constantly being bombarded.
Yeah.
But we need these sacramentals and the sacraments to keep that at bay. But yeah, there's groups that you're free to attend those masses, but they focus on healing and deliverance of evil.
It's more charismatic,
Charismatic.
which, again, there's always room for the church for all these different aspects.
It's fascinating.
It is, but also, again, I think as Sherry was saying, this just goes to the depth and the wideness of our faith, right? That, these things occur, and there's something true about the spirituality and the authority of the church that can do these things, right? So it's always important to keep that in perspective.
Can I share one tiny thing that I heard a talk, Steubenville, from a Steubenville retreat years ago. And Steubenville it's a city, it's a university, but it's very, they do a lot of teaching. Anyway, and it was this wonderful talk on prayer, and it gave the acronym. So it encouraged people to use PRAY, so pray, and it gave them 4 steps. So I love it, and so I thought I'd share it really quick, if that's okay. Like the P stands for praise. So you start your prayer with praise. Oh God, I love you, thank you, you are the Alpha, you are the Omega, whatever your favorite way to praise God is. The R is repent and receive. So you're kind of like putting out the things that you're wanting to leave at the foot of the cross, or ask God to help you. I'm sorry for that, I wish I wouldn't have done that, etc. Repent. A stands for ask. So make sure it's God. And Y stands for yield. So stopping and yielding and I love that. So when I get all discombobulated and I need to reorient myself, I kind of use that acronym to help me pray on a daily basis. So anyway, that's my little favorite thing I heard one time.
Oh, that's great.
Can you tell us about the next couple weeks before we know?
For Lent, you mean, or talking about it in general?
No, because we were talking before. We know there's something on the 27th, but we can't remember.
Okay, 27th would be the right. I'm sorry, are you done with the?
All good.
Okay. The
Part
27th, so
two is
next
next
week.
week.
Next week will be the rite of sending. Right.
Okay.
So just like we had the rite of acceptance, right? We'll have you come into the sanctuary, just like you did last time. We'll have some. So that be there for the creed and for the petitions. We'll have a prayer over you, and then you guys can go sit down, right?
Okay.
Then the week after is the
Do
rite.
we need our sponsors?
It would be good if they're there, but they're not necessary.
Okay.
Do we go up on the altar?
In the sanctuary.
Oh, well, at least I'm better prepared this
Yeah,
time.
at least we know.
Yeah, sorry, kind of sprung it. That's my
No,
fault.
I just was like, I didn't
I was
prep
really
my
anxious.
outfit well. I didn't.
The
like,
week
really,
after, so the week after, which is the first Sunday in Lent,
Right.
We won't have a session.
Okay,
like
so
this,
no
right?
class.
No class. We'll have the rite of election. So you guys again will come into the sanctuary at the 11 a.m. Mass.
Okay.
We'll have some prayers. We'll actually have a dialogue with you guys too. With that.
Can we start?
Well, no, you just have to know what to say, and I'll give you the word next week. I'll tell you what it's going to be next week.
Okay.
And then we'll have a luncheon that afternoon. So I'll send emails out this week to kind of get an understanding of what you guys may want for that lunch. Maybe kind of understand
Here
where we
we'll
want to
have
go.
a lunch?
Down here, yeah. And then after that, we're going to go down to the cathedral and have a tour of the cathedral basilica.
And there's no class on that day?
No
right?
class on that day.
Okay.
But there's class next week.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I repeat this?
I'm sorry.
Can I repeat this?
Go
Please
ahead.
do.
Yeah.
Okay, so next week, we come to class.
Right.
We go to the 11 a.m. Mass.
Yes.
We'll be requested to do the rite sending.
Yes.
And it's great if our sponsors can come, but not necessary.
Correct.
March 6th, we have no class.
Right.
We do the lunch, we do a tour of the cathedral. There's no class, I think, I don't know if I said
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
for that one, our sponsors are necessary.
Yes.
For the entire
It'd be good.
thing, for
Uh,
portions of the thing.
For the rite of election, for sure. But if they don't want to stick around for the luncheon or they want to go to the tour, that's up to them. They're more than welcome.
Can our families go on
Of course.
the tour?
Of course, yes. Yeah.
Because my kid would like love
If your
that.
families
yeah.
want to come to
That's
lunch,
great.
that's fine too. Just let me know. When I send the email, just let me know how much, what you want, and who's coming.
Okay.
And then, after the tour, you guys are, that's it.
Okay.
All right.
But it's okay if families come.
Correct.
Okay, awesome.
Right. And then, of course, then we started in the Lent, so scrutinies. Now, next we're going to talk about kind of more about the Lenten stuff
Oh, man.
and kind of what's going to be,
Like when I leave.
what your obligations will be in that, right? So just we'll talk about that next week.
All right, thank you.
Okay. What's that?
Thank you.
Okay.
And then, okay, I think.
Yeah, if you gotta go to mass, go ahead. But yeah, if you want to stick around, ask questions, welcome to stick around.
Is there anything that you know about Lenten responsibilities?
Sure. Well, I might as well talk about this now. Okay, so for Lent, for every Catholic, and you guys are included in this because you're going to enter the church, right? Mm-hmm. There are certain obligations that apply for Lent. So, for instance, there are 2 days out of the season that all Catholics between the ages of 13 and 59 are required to fast on certain days. Those 2 days are Ash Wednesday, so the first day of Lent, and then also Good Friday.
And Pat does this.
Yeah.
And so, like, I've watched this for, like, he does the whole fasting thing.
Yeah.
Because that's who he is.
Yeah. Oh, just in general.
Well, on the
for those 2 days.
Yeah. And I'm like, why? But
yeah.
How
So
long do you fast for? 24 hours, 12 hours?
okay, so fast. What that means is you can have one large meal or 2 small meals throughout that day, right?
So Pat, my husband doesn't eat until dinner on those days.
Great. Whatever works, right? So that's how we understand fasting. Part of that's just because we want to maintain health, right? No one should be passing out because they don't have enough. Now, the other exemption would be like medical issues, right? Fine. But anyone for ages 13 to 59, they meet that obligation. Every Friday in Lent, we sacrifice eating meat. We abstain from meat, right? So part of that, and we'll talk about that more next week, why we do that kind of stuff, right? But that's a requirement for anyone over the age of 13. Actually, no, wait.
I don't eat meat.
That's required for anybody.
Yeah,
everybody,
it's never been
right?
a problem for me.
And again, the only exception to that would be like, if there's some, medical issue or whatever else, right? So those are kind of it.
Okay.
Now, traditionally, people tend to either give up or do something specific in Lent, right? So maybe your kids might, when we'll come back and like, oh yeah, I'm giving up candy this for Lent. Okay, good luck.
Right.
The only thing I'll say with that is it should be something that really is good for you and good for other people. So in other words, what I mean by that is, if you're going to say I'm going to give up coffee for Lent. Okay, well, if you become an ogre if you don't drink your coffee, that's not really helping anybody, right? Yeah, it should be something that's reasonable, okay? And if it's, maybe it's like I'm gonna come to daily mass during Lent. Maybe I'm going to go down to the soup kitchen maybe once in a while during Lent. It doesn't have to be very, it should be something that's sacrificial,
right?
But it's something that you should want to do for your own spiritual good and the spiritual good of others.
And it's to focus you in on the reason
of what's going on in the season, right? That the whole point of the season is preparation for Easter, right? For the actual sacrifice. We're actually in some way trying to coincide with the sacrifice of Jesus Christ.
We're doing all the Lent stuff with the Communion of Saints.
Correct. So there's other things too we usually do during Lent. Like, so we'll have opportunities for like more confession times, which may not apply to you guys yet, but still. We'll have Stations of the Cross on certain days of the week, like Wednesdays, and also with the kids we have a couple times on Friday.
Oh.
Right. So there's also fun time, like some fish fries start up.
That is
right?
fun. I always very much enjoy
Every
that.
Friday. Now we can talk about how sacrificial those are, but whatever.
No, there's such a feeling of community,
but it's a good time
and I really missed it.
Exactly.
Is it going to be full on this year?
It's going to be sit down. They're going to so it's going to be the same we have before.
Pat joined the committee this year, so I'll keep you guys.
Okay.
So the mass, when you come in mass, it's like a restaurant in the city, so you wear in, but they sit down, fine, whatever. But look at the bulletin. The bulletin have all that stuff out there.
I'm so excited.
So it's actually, tell you the truth, for me, it's my favorite time of the year. It sounds weird because but I mean, the music, the liturgy, the stuff that we do it's just very, it kind of just, it's something good about it.
I love
It's
all
meant to
songs.
ground you.
Yes.
It's meant to it's meant to bring you, orient you back.
Yes.
It is actually my favorite liturgical season also because it's a time when you've drifted, you likely have drifted, you're unanchored possibly, and Lent is a way to kind of bring you back.
Right.
And allow you to kind of feel the more connection with God. And then you can go forward from the Lenten season a little bit more oriented towards God because we all drift. Human beings drift. So Lent is lovely for that.
As we get closer, we call the Triduum, which is the 3 days after Lent before Easter. So good, Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday. We may ask you guys to maybe participate in some of the liturgies with those, specifically on Holy Thursday.
Oh yeah.
When we actually wash the feet.
Oh,
Now I'm not
pedicure.
excited, but
It's actually a beautiful thing, and so we might ask you guys to maybe participate in
And
that.
Monsignor's doing that, right?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
And so yeah, I mean, usually he does. But just so you know, I mean, but I just encourage you guys to maybe pray about that. And you don't have to, but it would be kind of good maybe if you
So
thought
you
about
literally
that.
mean physically washing feet?
Yes.
Okay.
I know, get your pedicure, Jenny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pope Francis did it.
Yeah, and so this is a tradition that goes back generations. This has always been kind of part of that liturgy on Holy Thursday, and so it's really it's actually kind of a symbolic of Jesus washing the feet of the apostles.
And it can be really moving.
It can
because
be.
the thing about it is it's the awareness that of someone loving you so much, they're willing to touch the dirtiest part of
Right.
you. Right?
Right.
The idea of the stuff you don't want other people to know and stuff.
It's an intimacy. It is an
It is.
intimacy.
It's
It is, yeah.
So this time of year, my feet are really ugly, they're really crusty,
Good.
they are
The uglier
very-
the better.
Yeah.
The uglier the better.
So for Ash Wednesday, could we show up to?
Yeah. So Ash Wednesday. I mean, so here's the thing. Ash Wednesday is not a holy day of obligation,
Right.
right? So it's not like you're obligated to, but it would be good
Yeah.
to go,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, we have 4 masses that day: 6, 8, noon, and 6. So if you can go to one of those, great, and
Yeah.
receive the ashes, great. Yeah, good.
So, can I ask you, do you have a second?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want it
so-
on camera or off camera?
No, I don't care.
Okay,
When,
Turn it off.
like, I am not to the point that I feel comfortable, like, doing the ritualistic, like, sign, like,
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
yet. Is that okay?
Sure.
Like, I don't feel like I've earned it yet.
Right.
No.
So okay, so
So my
maybe-
husband and I were talking. He's like, "Well, other people in your class do it," and I was like, "I understand that, but I just don't feel like I'm there."
So Beth, let me give you some